You know, if you don't clean out your billfold, occasionally it gets full of all sorts of things. Old cards and addresses and telephone numbers and receipts and even old travel stubs. Some of them make you think of things you'll not forget. Take this railroad ticket stub here. Reminds me of a little trip I took not too long ago, just over to Fort Conroe, but I doubt if I'll ever forget it. Actually, it's the story of Henry Arnold, 16-year-old. Henry's father and mother are fine folks, members of the church for a long time. But one night, Henry left home. It was more than a childish adventure. It threatened a family break. Developed rather suddenly, too. Around dinner time one night, Henry's father and mother were talking about an event which had been a household topic for a good many days. It was the big social event of the year in the school, the senior prom. And it involved their son, Henry, and his girl, Maggie.
And so, dear, if everything doesn't go just like he planned it, well, we'll have a boy to bury.
Don't you think we're taking our boy's love life a little too seriously? You know, he'll probably fall in love a half dozen times before he ever marries.
Well, that's what comes of just having the one. Oh, by the way, did you remember to get the car washed, dear?
I sure did.
Oh, I can't understand what's keeping Henry. He's never this slow.
Oh, he'll be along. Dance doesn't start till 9, does it?
No, and it'll last pretty late, dear. You know, it's the biggest event of the year, so let's not say anything to Henry about keeping the car out too late.
All right, dear. Oh, here he is now. Hello, son.
Oh, you'll have to hurry, Henry.
Hello, Ma.
Your dinner's all ready, dear, and you haven't much time. It's after 6:30.
Here's the keys of the car, son. It's had a good wash job.
Thanks. I won't be needing it.
Oh, you're taking Maggie in someone else's car, dear?
No?
Something wrong, Henry?
Maybe.
Oh, if you've had a fuss with Maggie, you just go on and go anyway.
Oh, sure. There are lots of pretty girls in school. And you know, being a stag isn't too bad.
It isn't Maggie.
Well, if it isn't Maggie, then
I told her I couldn't take her to the dance.
Why couldn't you take her?
Because I just didn't want to go to the dance, that's all. I just didn't want to go.
But it's the senior
For
prom.
crying out loud, do I have to have a reason for everything?
What will Maggie think?
Just a minute, Mother. Henry, something's happened. What is it?
Is it true? Is it true that you're an ex-convict?
Yes, son.
Oh, we wanted to tell you, Henry.
I did serve a term.
But we were afraid to.
It's a long story, and it's hard to tell. But I'll try.
How can I ever face my friends? An ex-convict for a father. How can I ever face anybody again?
How could he face his friends? Henry was afraid to even try. And so late that night, he quietly left home. Not to do anything bad. But Henry was shocked and hurt and not a little bit selfish. His father and mother were greatly concerned, and we talked many times about how they could deal with their son. They hoped that he would want to come back, and if he did, they were anxious to make it easy for him to do it. When we discovered where he was, they asked me if I would go see him. That was the reason for the trip to Fort Conroe. I found him living in a cheap boarding house. When I got there, he was packing his bag, getting ready to go out on what he thought was a job. Saw your folks, Henry.
You did?
Yeah, how are things with you?
All right, I guess.
You leaving soon?
Maybe. I got a chance for a job.
What about school? You through with that?
I don't know.
Can I help you work out anything?
Maybe. I'm kind of mixed up.
About what to do, or is it your family?
Why did my dad go to prison?
For something a lot less serious than you probably imagine. But it must have been a shock to you to learn that he had been in prison.
Yeah.
You're hurt, too.
Well, sure. After all, they never told me.
How do you think they felt?
I don't know.
You know, Henry, when we love someone, believe in them, count on them, it does hurt if we discover that they've done something wrong, either now or in the past. Your dad did do something wrong. But from the moment he walked out of that prison door, he's had a terrific battle within himself and with the world to try to rebuild his life. I think he's done a wonderful job. So how do you think he felt when you walked out on him?
Bad, I guess. What did Dad do?
When he was about your age, 16, he drove a car for 3 boys that held up a gas station. I don't think he realized what they were doing until it was too late.
So that's what they were trying to tell me. The night that I left.
Yeah. Sometimes it's harder to know whether the past is best buried or talked about. Maybe they should have told you sooner, I don't know, but even if they made a mistake, that shouldn't deprive them of your love. Maybe you ought to go home, Henry.
They'll never want to see me again.
Sure they do, and the sooner the better. You're their life. They love you. Why, ever since they knew you were coming to them, they've hoped and planned and worked for you. If you've treated them badly, they've forgiven you already. They just want you to come home.
But how can I, Pastor? I mean, how can I face them after the way that I've acted?
It takes courage.
Well, what would I say? I've been such a heel.
Say you've been a heel. Admit it. Tell them you're sorry.
It's pretty hard to do.
Yes, it's hard because pride gets in the way like a roadblock.
Pride?
Yeah, pride's the thing that drove you away from home, Henry. It's the thing that's keeping you away now. Pride that won't let you say, I'm sorry.
But I am sorry. It's just that, well, I don't know if I can bring myself to say that I'm sorry to Mom and to Dad.
Until you do learn to say, I'm sorry, going home is never possible.
I just don't know if I can ever bring myself to face them again.
I know you can, Henry. I believe in you. I'll be pulling for you. It was a long road and a hard way back home for Henry, but he made it. And he found the door open and all the love and forgiveness in the world waiting for him. He was back where he belonged. The hardest part of the journey for Henry was to conquer his pride and to admit that he was sorry. You know, sometimes we say that it's hard to forgive, and it is, but it's equally hard to accept forgiveness. For that involves our admitting our shortcomings and our wrongdoings. We do hate to say, I'm sorry. And yet, literally, homes break up, friendships are lost, and persons are separated from each other and from God, simply for the lack of these words, I'm sorry. Perhaps this is where we need the help of Christ. Through the church, its fellowship, and its message, Christ reveals to us how God, through the centuries, has been loving and forgiving us and longing for us to accept that love and forgiveness. But Christ does more than that. He becomes the companion who helps us to become strong enough to conquer our pride. He becomes the companion of our way back home, back to the place where we can accept the forgiveness which waits for us. In other words, in his ministry of reconciliation, Christ not only reveals the forgiveness that is ours, but he helps us to be strong enough to say to another person or to God, I have been wrong. I admit it. I'm sorry. There is a sense in which God is like a father who waits for us, for our return. It's the ageless invitation which we find in the words of a hymn which has been known to some of us through many, many years. Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling, come home.
Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling for you and for me. Patiently, Jesus is waiting and watching, watching for you and for me. Come home, come home, ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, oh sinner, come home.
The story of Henry Arnold is not greatly different from the story Jesus told about a prodigal son and a father's love. Here are two sentences from his story. I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.
One of the distinctive marks of an American community is its churches, with their spires pointing skyward or their towers climbing upward. The very buildings remind us that life consists of more than the things we can touch and handle. They remind us that life has a third dimension, not only the past and the present, but a future. And every church is an invitation for us to find the real meaning of life, an invitation for us to find the help and comfort and strength of the Christian faith. The church invites us to bring our lives into tune with truth and honor and goodness. It urges us to become more what we ought to be.